It's your Tuesday daily delivery. I am Michael Rand. Happy to be back for another day. Hope everybody's having a great day out there today. Hope everybody's having a much better day than the Minnesota Twins have had in the last 4 days, 4 games. Get to that here in a minute. Lots to get to today, though. Jon Marthaler joins me here in a little bit to talk Minnesota United soccer, a team that's actually winning its games so far this season. 5-game unbeaten streak, although not all great news along the way. We'll get into that team. We'll get into some U.S. men's national team stuff. We even talked a little bit of Twins, incidentally, in relation to the TV stuff with MLS and what the Twins are trying to do this season. So stick around for Jon here in just a few minutes. Wild thought at the end of the show. Women's basketball at the end of the show. Quick on the Vikings and Kevin O'Connell's comments at the end of the show as well, although more on that at the Access Vikings podcast that just went live last night with Ben Gessling and Emily Leiker. Ben down in Florida for the meetings down in Florida, so Kevin O'Connell down there yesterday. You can check that out, Star Tribune YouTube channel or on the Access Vikings podcast. First, though, what I miss, like I said, the Twins at the jump, I kind of spoiled it a little bit. Twins at the jump, 0-4. They got absolutely blasted by the previously awful Chicago White Sox. Maybe the White Sox are a little bit better this season. They basically cleaned house from the terrible roster they had last season that lost all those games, 100 and like a million games, over 100 games last season. The distant fifth place team in the AL Central. Yeah, the Twins lost 9-0 to that team, and it was 9-0 early. Long home runs with guys on base. Chris Paddock absolutely rocked. One day after Bailey Ober was absolutely rocked. Pablo Lopez was knocked around pretty good in his first start. Joe Ryan's the only one out of the 4 that's given them any semblance of a chance to win so far, and Paddock and Ober in particular have put them in such a hole that they've had no way to climb out of it. It was so bad in Monday's game in Chicago. They were sparsely attended, by the way. They announced 10,000. I counted about 12. 12 people total, not 12,000. Rocco Baldelli, manager Rocco Baldelli, was 9-0 already in the top of the 4th inning. He pulls Byron Buxton and Carlos Correa for pinch hitters. So basically, like, gets them out of the game. Waves the white flag with 6 innings and 18 outs left to go. Just says, you know what? These guys are fragile. These guys are oft injured. Don't want to get them hurt in a game like this. Let's get Edouard Julien a little bit of an at-bat, some experience. He played shortstop for an inning. Didn't go great. Fielded a ball. Took his time throwing it. And a guy was safe at first base. Not great there. So Buxton and Correa both got some time off. Deshaun Kiersey played in place of Buxton. I don't think I've ever seen a manager pull guys that early, wave the white flag that early. Game 4 of the season, inning 4 of the game. I don't know. Practically, it makes some sense from an optics standpoint. How are you saying we can't come back and win this game? How are you saying we can't make a rally here? You know, you put up one big inning in the 4th. So you score 5 runs in the 4th inning. Not out of the question, right? The White Sox have been piling up crooked numbers all game. Put up 5 in the 4th inning. It's a game all of a sudden. All of a sudden, it's a game. Don't give yourselves a chance to do that. Yeah, I know they didn't concede. I know they didn't say, hey, nobody's going to bat, but taking out 2 of your best hitters, 2 of your most accomplished hitters against a left-handed pitcher to put in 2 left-handed batters. That was essentially waving the white flag. That doesn't seem to be a great idea. There doesn't seem to be much panic or urgency with the Twins, and I'm kind of stuck between, it's game 4 out of 162. If this was the middle of the season, people would be upset, but they wouldn't be saying the sky is falling. There would be a larger body of work to say, okay, we can fall back on that. We know this team has done X, Y, and Z. When it happens at the start of the season, you don't know that. We don't know if this is just a terrible team that has fallen apart at the wrong time, like 2016, the total system failure team that started 0-9. worst start in Twins history, but only like a handful of Twins teams have started 0-4 and then come back to be anywhere near good. I mean, only a couple have started even 0-4 at all. This team in dangerous territory. You'd like to think that you're not into must-win territory before we even get into April, but this is April 1st. This team desperately could use a win tonight. Otherwise, 0-5, that 2016 comparison starts getting stronger. The total system failure starts getting stronger. Rocco Baldelli, after the 9-0 loss yesterday, again, trying not to panic, but man, I feel like it's time to panic. But here was Rocco after the game trying to calm everybody down.
Kind of getting maybe a little bit in our own way, and you start thinking a lot when things don't go the way that you want. And today was a tough, obviously a very difficult ball game from the very beginning. 2 in a row makes it probably twice as hard to deal with it. But I think what we really need to do more than anything is just play and not think. The more that you think, the more I think you get in your own way at times as a group. And again, I've said this a few times, and I know it's not the most enticing thing to hear. You know, we are 4 games in. It's been a challenging 4 games, no doubt. There's no way around it. But we have guys they're going to hit their stride and they're going to play great baseball. We have not done it to this point, but we have the guys to do it.
So it's a night game tonight. Twins will put Simeon Woods Richardson, their number 5 starter, out there in hopes of ending this skid to start the season. See if anybody can get a hit. The hitting's been terrible. The pitching's been terrible. They've been outscored like 28-6 this season. The fielding has not been great. As Mike Zimmer would say,
so other than that, it's been great.
That's where we are with this team. 4 games into the season. That's where we are 4 games into the year. It's ugly already. Fans are upset. We got a bunch of people complaining still about the TV stuff, especially people who have Mediacom and are not able to get the games. Maybe they're lucky right now. Maybe they're lucky they can't watch this right now because it has not been pleasant to watch. I've watched plenty of it through the MLB TV subscription that I bought. I'm not loving it. I'll watch tonight. I'll see how it goes. But man, losing faith in this team early, and to be honest, I didn't have a ton of faith in them going into the season anyway. I always feel like Mondays we give soccer a little bit of the short end of the stick. Maybe because Mondays are always with Royce, not the foremost soccer expert. So we're bringing on Jon Marthaler today to talk a little bit of Loons, maybe some other stuff. John, how you doing?
It's time to break down the Battle of Stalingrad. Let's go.
You never know. Royce and I might do that some week. You never know because it gets a little bit off topic sometimes. But it looks like this is a pretty good club right now. Probably wishing they had been able to finish off the Kansas City match when they had a 3-0 lead, gave 3 to them, and that's the only points of the season for Kansas City before they fired their manager Monday morning. But those are quibbles. Those are quibbles a little bit because mostly they've been playing well outside of a couple of finishing efforts at the end of games.
Yeah, it's funny that losing a 3-0 lead to the worst team in the league and dropping a couple of points, that sort of a way of papering over the fact that they're now 5 games unbeaten since the start of the year. So they lost their first game. Now they've gone 5 without losing. Eric Ramsey said last week that we should wait until they've played 10 or 12 games before we start to really offer some opinions. And I think there's some accuracy to that, given that they play Kansas City, the worst team in the league, the LA Galaxy that's struggling, Real Salt Lake is struggling. So they've had a little bit of maybe a soft schedule, even if on paper you look and it's got both LA teams in it, which is not necessarily a soft schedule, but just the way that things have gone with other teams playing in the CONCACAF Champions Cup and stuff like that, it hasn't been too hard of a schedule yet. So probably still time to reserve judgment. But if you look at the expected goals, the advanced stats, they're the best team in the league. So there's reason to be excited too, I guess is what I'm saying.
There you have it. Parade route. What's the parade route? Because they're kind of in a weird spot. Green line parade
in the downtowns. Like, what do you do?
You got to do it all. I don't know.
You can ride the green line.
Ride the green line.
Not the middle car, though.
Ride it all the way. Not the middle car. Don't go in the middle car. But they can do it all. The thing that, their identity is built around defense. We've talked about that. Eric Ramsey talked about that a couple weeks ago here on this show. But in general, they do seem to be able to score goals, whether it's counterattack, whatever it is, and they seem to have two pretty capable strikers right now.
Yeah, they've got Tenny Oluwaseyi and Kelvin Yeboah, who are they're sort of competing for the lead in the goals for the team. Although after the game, I asked Oluwaseyi on Saturday whether they were competing, and he said that week he had said to Yeboah in training, he said, "Man, I love competing with you in training." Yeboah looked at him and said, "Don't compete with me, compete with yourself." So, that's deep. That's good advice for all of us to don't compete with yourself. He's the Zlatan, or for Ted Lasso viewers, the Zava of this team right now, saying deep things during training. So I think if I have the numbers right, they both have 4 goals this season. They both Oluwaseyi has two goal games. Yeboah's got 1. It's obviously a good problem to have. They changed how they play this year so that they could have both strikers on the field instead of just one center forward. And at the time, it was a little like, well, they had they had a fair amount of success playing with just one, and I don't know if it's necessarily a good idea to play with both. But if they're both going to score 2 goals every other game, hard to argue with that setup.
Stylistically, I haven't paid enough attention to break down exactly what they do well. Are they similar players? Do they finish differently? How do you kind of compare the two?
I think they are different players. I think Yeboah is more of your classic hold up kind of player, because you can play the ball to him and he'll hold off a defender and try to work other guys. Oluwaseyi is more of a counter attacker. Obviously they both do it, and they're still figuring out, I think, how to work together a little bit. I think there's still a lot of moments when you got to counterattack with both of them, and both of them are naturally inclined to try to score themselves, whether they're 1-on-1 or 1-on-3. And so I think they're still working out how to maybe do that. I guess the truth is that if you take every shot, as long as you score, everything is fine. There's Oluwaseyi's second goal on Saturday. He had Yeboah sort of over to his left. He could have passed it. He chose to shoot instead, and he scored. So it's hard to argue with that. But I think they're slightly different players, but not different enough that you look and say, all right, Yeboah does this part and Oluwaseyi does this part. They're similar enough that they're both sort of doing the same thing on either side of the field, if you see what I mean.
Now, the Hassani Dotson loss, it's been quite a saga with him already this season. It was, the preseason trade discussion request, and then he gets hurt. He's, out for quite a while. Do we know if he's opted for the trim or the full meniscus repair yet? He said he had surgery, right?
Yes, he had surgery last week. They didn't specify whether they did the trim or the full remodel or whatever you called it, right, there. But
full repair, yeah.
Yeah, they didn't say for sure. All they said is that he's out for months. They specifically did not put him on the season-ending injury list, which would have allowed them to use his cap dollars to sign a replacement player. Basically, they still could do that up until this summer. They haven't done it yet. It's a little early anyway, so they might not have done it even if he had chosen the full 9 yards for the repair. I don't know what kind of choice he got. They didn't release the details of his surgery last week, but he tore his meniscus, which is it's bad. It's obviously bad. It's good in the sense that it's not his ACL. Again, he tore the ACL in his same knee 3 years ago. So not having that go again, I think the one small silver lining is that he didn't do that, but obviously it's terrible. Especially he was sort of in a situation where he bet on himself contract wise, where he didn't sign the extensions the Loons were offering. He asked for a trade to go and do something else, and now he's out for months, and that's the worst thing that could have happened to him right now. So you feel for him. You feel for the guy.
Well, and if it's a full repair, it's probably it could be season ending. We're way too familiar with meniscus surgeries here in the Twin Cities, with JJ McCarthy having just gone through it, and sounds like he's pretty much up to full speed at this point. But that's we're talking about August when he got hurt, and now it's the beginning of April right now, so it's way down on the calendar, I think. But Jimmy Butler, I think, several years ago when he was with the Wolves, got the repair, and he was back within a month and a half. So it can vary pretty widely. Kind of depends on where you are in your career, how much long-term, kind of arthritis I think you're willing to withstand perhaps later in life. But Yeah, for him, I mean, it could kind of spell an unfortunate kind of end to his season, and ultimately maybe his tenure here, if that's how it plays out.
If that's how it ends up working out with the contract, I guess it's possible that was the last we've seen of Asani Dotson in a Loons jersey, which is just sad. He's a guy that's been around. I think this is his 7th season for the Loons. Incredibly hard worker. He was playing probably the best he has in his career. He'd sort of found not a specific role, but a role in that he had started every game for Minnesota in the midfield this year, and that's not something you could say of anybody else. And you talk about meniscus injuries. The same thing happened to Robin Lod a couple of years ago, and I think it happened in May, and he missed the rest of the season. So it's obviously something that Loons fans are familiar with too. So it's a little earlier, of course. It's March, it's not May, so there's possibly some room at the end of the season. But it's going to be a tough road, and he's a tough guy and a hard worker. So there's obviously that to go on, but you feel bad for him.
How do they replace what he's been doing on the field? I mean, obviously they did it the other night. They've done it a little bit so far, but doing it for another 30-ish games is a different story if that ends up being the case.
Yeah, it's funny. They were sort of rotating 4 guys through 3 spots, so the obvious move right away is, well, now you've got 3 guys for 3 spots. But they signed a couple of young midfielders in the offseason, Ho Yun Jung and Owen Jen, that they were sort of moving in slowly, though Jen has played 3 or 4 games in a row as a sub now, like for the last 10 minutes, sort of a defensive replacement. So possible for him. Carlos Harvey, he's been playing right center back, but he's a midfielder by trade. We talked to him last week, and he said that's his natural position. I think he called it his habitual position in Spanish. So he's a guy that Ramsey always names as a possible midfield depth thing. So it's clear that Eric Ramsey is thinking, at least partially, Carlos Harvey is a guy that can come into the midfield and play defensive midfielder and be a guy that can be part of that midfield rotation. So it's not necessarily that they're hurting for depth or need to make a signing right away. And that's sort of what Ramsey said too, of where we don't feel desperate to make a signing. Obviously, they're not ruling anything out, but is Aaron Rodgers? Has he ever played midfield? They haven't ruled out signing.
Never ruled out anything
as a midfield replacement. So
that would be.
Does that count? That counts as mentioning Aaron Rodgers on the pod. I was required to do it once, though.
That'd be a delightful surprise.
That's the daily delivery tax you have to.
Yes,
it is. Yes, Aaron Rodgers at one point.
Yes. We have to do that, or we have to have a weird music discussion.
Yeah,
which I don't think
80s music reference.
80s music references. U.S. men's national team is playing at Allianz later this year. How many people show up is another question, though, right?
That's the women's national team. The women's national team is at Allianz Field later.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry.
The men's national team is the Gold Cup, which is the CONCACAF summer tournament, is at US Bank Stadium this year. They're doing the draw in April. I don't know. I don't think it's guaranteed that the U.S. will be here. I can't find any information like that. So they could send us anybody. What I wrote in the newspaper was, please send us anybody with the U.S. men's national team, because
they would still draw better than other teams,
right? But it's just
but the quality is not there right now.
I've been watching the U.S. men's national team for a long time, and it's just a bleak kind of situation. Last week they were playing in the Nations League, which is like the small continental tournament. The U.S. had won it 3 times in a row, but they were playing at SoFi Stadium in Los Angeles. And whatever you say about Los Angeles and Southern California, without getting into an argument about what is the soccer capital of the United States, certainly Southern California is in the discussion as one of the soccer capitals of the United States. So you would think, putting the game at SoFi Stadium, at least it would be somewhat well attended. U.S. soccer is famous for charging $1 billion for every one of these stupid games, and so the tickets were super expensive. I believe, I'm not sure of this, I believe they sold them as a package, so that you had the U.S. game, and then you also had a ticket for the Mexico game later that night. And it was clear when they kicked off the U.S. game, which was the early game, it was a home game, but it was the early game because most of the people want to see Mexico, not the United States. There were like 4,000 people in the stands. It was bleak. You have to go back a long time, even as somebody who's been a fan of the men's national team for a long time, to find something as bleak as the USA losing at home to Panama in front of nobody. Just a no fight, no real sense of anything. And I spent a lot of time ripping U.S. soccer for charging too much, and all these organizations that are putting all these tournaments in the United States, and there's some of that too. But one of the big things that really got people into to become fans of soccer for American people is the U.S. men's national team. And one of the things that really attracted people was the sense that, these are our guys. They're fighting. They might be underdogs. They're fighting uphill, but they certainly are representing something that we like to see in ourselves. This group is not that right now. It is not a fun group to be a fan of. It's not a fun group to watch. You got guys. It's like the old days, because people are arguing about whether players should play. They should have more MLS guys in the team or more of these European guys, and it's rough. It's a throwback to the old days.
Why are they so bad? I thought they were on the upswing at a certain point, and then they obviously want to be, peaking for 2028 when the World Cup is here, right?
2026, yeah. That's
2026, yeah. So
it's 15 months away.
Yeah, I forgot. Yeah,
I mean,
the cycle's different. Yeah.
The other rough thing is that they don't have any qualification games. They've already qualified for the World Cup. So one of the things that sort of builds the team in between World Cups is
because they're the hosts. They're automatically in, right? Yes.
Yeah. So they have the Gold Cup this summer, and that's it for competitive games between now and the World Cup. So they'll play friendlies, and they'll play probably other Nations League games, because you can't somehow escape the Nations League at any point. But it's just there's not that many opportunities for them to right the ship here. And the more people I talk to and the more things I read, I'm sort of coming around to the idea that one of the struggles about this team is that they have too many guys who are playing in Europe. And I'm not saying there's anything worse about European soccer here. I'm not trying to make that dumb argument, but you've got a lot of guys who are playing specific roles on really good teams in Europe. Christian Pulisic playing at AC Milan and Weston McKennie playing at Juventus and stuff like that. Obviously, they're playing for top teams, and that's great. But when it comes to playing a team like Panama at home in the Nations League, you got to have guys who can sort of take over that are used to playing that role where they're the focal point and the centerpiece. And I think that's why you see Diego Luna, who's playing for Real Salt Lake. Obviously, you certainly wouldn't look and say this guy is the most talented player in the U.S. pool, but he is the focal point for Real Salt Lake, and he's responsible for driving forward that team. And so he is used to it in a way that these guys who are much bigger names and much better paid and playing in much better teams are not. And you start to wonder if there's something to that. You go back to the days of Landon Donovan and Clinton Dempsey, and these are guys that took a lot of criticism. Donovan for barely ever going to Europe, and Dempsey from coming back from Europe and being the focal point for teams in MLS. But they certainly were better in games like this of being the focal point and driving forward a team. So maybe there's something to that.
Yeah, there could be. That's a good point, because you're right. Donovan was he was probably the most celebrated player they've had, right? And he was, he was the Joe Mauer of U.S. soccer, both the most celebrated and most criticized player in national team history. And the farther we get away, just like Joe Mauer, the farther we get away from it, it's like, no, actually, that was really good. Like, actually, he got a lot of criticism for not going to Europe, and no, it was actually really good that he stayed here and We'd love to go to the World Cup quarterfinals again.
That's right.
That'd be delightful.
At the time, it was like, oh, Landon Donovan, is he really leading the team? And now it's like, this team badly needs a Landon. Like, is Landon Donovan still in shape enough to play? Because they need Landon Donovan bad. He's got to be, 48? I don't know. Get into training, Landon. I'll look up his age. That's right. Play for the Des Moines Menace like every other former MLS player.
There you go. Get into that. Shifting gears a little bit, are you enjoying the Twins season so far, John?
Well, the Twins season, obviously it's nice that they're adding to that 12-27 record at the end of the year, and just, you just sort of extend it across seasons. It's like Sporting Kansas City having their winless streak go over seasons. And they're now 12-30 in their last 42. I'm curious. So you are the TV expert. You were the guy.
Reluctantly.
No, yeah. People email you if you need to know what channel the Twins are on today. Just email Mike. He knows exactly what to do.
Yeah, exactly.
But I'm curious. I was curious for your thoughts, because the Loons and MLS have gone to this all streaming way of doing things. And now the Twins have moved in that direction. They're not in the same place as the Loons are. But I'm curious as to your thoughts of, are the Twins going to a Loons thing? Are the Loons better off? Like, are the Loons beyond and they're the thing that the Twins are aiming for, or are the Twins going to do it better than the Loons have done so far?
Well, I think what's complicated is it works when you get the whole league on board, right? Like, you've got to have everybody into the package. That's what Apple TV is selling. You get access to all the games basically, and then you can watch them all. And then you've got some of the MLS games are, shown on linear TV, like FS1's got some games, right? And so there's other ways to watch some, but if you want everything, you've got to have Apple TV. I think baseball would love to get to something like that. I don't know if they want to do all streaming or all on one place, but if they did, it'd probably be on their own MLB TV. Problem is, the biggest market teams either own or have these lucrative regional sports network deals that go a long way, that go a long time. Like the Dodgers, their deal goes like another decade, and they're getting paid, tons of money. Like they might take in $1 billion in revenue this season. That's one Major League Baseball team. That's like that dwarfs.
And the Twins won't take in $1 billion in revenue this decade.
Yeah, well, I mean, no, they will. They'll have that much.
Not from TV though.
Not from TV. No, not from TV. That wasn't just the Dodgers TV.
Oh, that wasn't just
whole revenue. But still, like their revenue dwarfs everybody else's, and then you got the New York teams, you got like other teams that are kind of locked into this model. So I think baseball would love to get to a point where they can put all 30 teams in one place and divide up the media revenue equally. That's the only the local and the national. Obviously, the national right now is split evenly, but the local is so disparate, and that's the real problem right now with baseball. Like the NFL is in a sweet spot because they've divided up the media revenue forever, and there's no local rights to the NFL. It's all national. The NBA is good enough. It's pretty close. Hockey, I think because of the hard cap, you don't get these problems. Like baseball is just in this weird spot where the media stuff got way out of hand and they don't have any kind of like cap or floor. So you get these disparate payrolls. So I think they would love to get to that point. I don't know quite how they get to that point at some, whether it's going to take, it's going to take something pretty significant probably after the 2026 season when the CBA is up to kind of figure this all out. Because I think everybody, no matter what they're saying about don't blame the Dodgers, everybody knows that this model isn't sustainable. If one team or two or three teams are able to afford all the best players, then everybody else is kind of fighting for the scraps. That's not a sustainable model. So I think they'd love to get to that point, something kind of like the MLS model. I don't think it's exactly the same, but something like that. I think they want to get there. How can they get there, though, based on what they already have right now?
Yeah, the MLS model is hard because you subscribe to the whole league and you get the whole league, which is great. But for a lot of people, and I think you see this just from the pricing of the Twins plan, if you just want the Twins, it's exactly half what it costs you to get the whole league. And there's no option to get just the Loons. And they're not on any local TV. Like, if you subscribe to cable, you can still watch Twins games. That's not true of the Loons. You have to subscribe to the streaming package. There's no local thing. And like you say, there's games on Fox channels. And if you have Apple TV Plus and you watch Severance and stuff, there's also games that are on that, but not, available
that
to you
aren't
if
part
you
of the
have
package. But okay,
I mean, they're part of MLS. You can see every game on MLS Season Pass no matter what, but you can also see them on if you have Apple TV Plus. Not that that's obvious to explain. No. I'm having trouble explaining right now, and I feel like I know what's going on. But I just think it's interesting that you've got the Twins have sort of this hybrid model between the old days of cable and the new days of streaming, which feels to me, in terms of being a fan, it feels to me like a better version of the MLS package, which is you subscribe to everything, but then they play all the games at the same time anyway. So basically you're just subscribing to your local team. And I think the other thing that you miss if you have MLS is that they don't have local broadcast teams anymore. And that was one of those things they sort of went with the NFL model, which at the time I think felt like, oh wow, it's like the NFL, it's big, Joe Buck and Troy Aikman will be calling all these MLS games. But I think the day-to-day stuff you miss having Michael Grady and Jim Pete complaining about the refs and stuff like that, rather than having a team that you're not even sure who is calling the game most of the time. So I think that is something that fans miss in general.
Yeah, I would be interested. I don't know if MLB could do that, even if they went to a national model. There's too many games. Like MLS can probably get away with it because even if the games happen a lot at the same time, the volume is too great to do that.
But I don't think you'd want that for baseball.
I don't think you would either. No, I don't think you would. No.
Like having Corey Provis and Justin Morneau that know everything and know these guys who played 3 games in AAA or whatever is way better than having the Fox team. Do they even have games on Fox anymore? I think they do, but having whatever Fox, and you can sort of see that from whenever they have these regional games on Fox, they have Corey Provis and the White Sox guy or whatever call these games because they've got sort of that deep knowledge. And I think that's something MLS has missed out on.
Yeah. Whatever cost savings there would be for baseball to go away from traveling their own guys would be minimal compared to what you would lose in the information and just the kind of the familiarity too. I think fans too, you tune in for 162 games a year. You want that familiar voice. So I think baseball, I think the model this year is good. I think MLS would probably benefit from having a local option where you can just pay for Loons games that was maybe obviously less than the entire league package. There's definitely been glitches in trying to get the Twins so far this year, but I actually haven't, I've watched a couple games. I've got the MLB.TV through my, just through my smart TV. It's been pretty seamless for me. I think most people are having a generally good experience, but there's outliers and there's people who are still frustrated about various avenues of it. Just, it's just like it's making the money work for baseball. And how does that all work? Because they used to get, the Twins in 2023 got $54.8 million from Bally Sports North for running those games, through Sinclair and through Diamond Sports, and then they're not getting that much this year. We don't know the exact number, but it's not near that number, and that's why the payroll's down, and that's why they got swept by the Cardinals. Not the only reason they got swept by the Cardinals in the opening series, but it's just kind of a negativity around some of this right now, and I think the TV stuff still plays a role in it. It's like, hey, we can't spend money. It's a hard way to live.
Yeah, if only the Twins had a billionaire owner that could invest some of his money into the team, that would be helpful.
They're worried about selling the team, not investing in the team. And their payroll is up. Their payroll is up a little bit from where it was last year. We do have to say that they didn't end up doing any of the trades in the offseason that they had been hinted at, and they did sign a couple guys this offseason that pushed payroll up a little higher than that range we talked about. So it's like halfway back to where it was in 2023, but it's still not at a level where you're going to compete seriously against some of the best teams in the league.
Yeah, do they have like coffee cans outside the stadium where I can contribute to Ty France and Harrison Bader's contracts?
I mean,
I talked to a lot of fans who are worried about whether the Poleads will get 1.7 or 1.5 billion for the team. Like they're concerned about the finances of the family.
How about Ty France, dude? They gave him like a $1 million 1 year non-guaranteed contract when he signed. Then all of a sudden, 2 days later, it was like, well, Ty France probably going to get 600 at bats this year. It's like, well, I guess he's going to be on. I guess that $1 million is going to be guaranteed pretty soon. I guess they hope they got a bargain with that. They
gave him the contract you would give somebody if he was like your friend's son. And 2 days later, it was like, wait a second. I'm looking around. This is the biggest offseason signing the Twins are going to make. We better hype this one up a little bit.
You're like, no, Ty France is going to play a lot. Ty France is going to play a whole bunch.
We got a lot of. It turns out we got a lot of at bats available over at first base there.
Lots of available at bats. Well, we veered off course a little bit, not into 80s music, but we got a lot of bases covered here, John. Appreciate it as always. What's next for the Loons? We're on a little bit of an international break too, aren't we? Isn't that fun?
No,
are we done?
No
with
international break, but they're going to the East Coast, so it might as well be an international break in the sense that they're not playing Western Conference games, and it feels a little bit. There's so few of them now; it almost feels like exhibitions. They're in New York this week. They're playing. It's Minnesota and New York at Yankee Stadium on a Sunday afternoon, but that's the Loons and the Pigeons, not the Twins and the Yankees. So
they had a bunch of guys missing against LA though, didn't they? Because Ramsey was complaining about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean they were missing 5 starters. The Galaxy were missing none. So that's just one of those things where you look, and MLS does a lot of weird things with the schedule, but you got to look and say there's got to be a Wednesday that later in the season they can play this game on rather than playing it on March 22nd in Minnesota. It was freezing. There's got to be a better option than what they did.
Feels like that's the motto. That's the tagline for sports right now. There's got to be a better option than for what they did.
Let's have a little bit of common sense here. There's got to be a better way.
Yes. All right, John. Appreciate it. We'll talk to you later.
Sounds good.
Great stuff from John. As usual, you'll notice we talked a little Twins there. It was before yesterday's game. Always the danger of, I was thinking, oh man, we're ripping them, and then all of a sudden they're going to win. They did not win. Of course, they did not win. It was the 9-0 loss. So everything we said stood, and then some about the Twins. They're 12-31 in their last 43 games dating back to last season. 12-31. Let's finish with the cooler. A lot of stuff packed into the cooler today. Kevin O'Connell, Vikings head coach, talked about quarterbacks at the meetings down in Florida, basically saying, kind of reaffirming his belief in J.J. McCarthy, but also acknowledging that they talked to Aaron Rodgers about the possibility. He said, 2 things can be true at the same time. We took a player 10th in the draft last year after a very extensive evaluation process. A lot of things that we hoped to see from him we saw in a short amount of time. Unfortunately, he got injured, and we tried to maximize as much as we could his quote-unquote redshirt year while still making sure we were getting Sam Darnold and our other quarterbacks ready to play. Then I think JJ was able to take some things out of that and be ready to go for the spring. Now, the second part of that can be true is Aaron Rodgers is a 4-time NFL MVP and somebody we've all had so much respect for competing against him. He happened to be at a point in time in his career where he was free to have some real dialogue about what his future may look like, and we happened to be one of those teams that he reached out to. I have had a personal relationship going back to my playing days, believe it or not. Insert Kevin's normal pun on my below-average playing career. He said he kept McCarthy updated almost borderline in real time. He said, I do see him every day throughout the week and thought it was important just so that he was hearing it from me and my perspective from the first time I had any conversations in regard to Aaron and any of the free agents we've discussed. Basically saying he believes in McCarthy, thinks he's going to be good. It's not, the door is not closed, obviously, but I do think that they're trying their best to make sure that McCarthy knows that it is his job going into camp, and that they're putting that on him. They didn't sign Aaron Rodgers. They talked to him, but they made a decision at this point. Remember, Aaron Rodgers isn't signed yet, but at this point, everything's pointing towards J.J. McCarthy. Can that change? Yeah, but right now, everything pointing towards J.J. McCarthy being QB1 in 2025. Wild. Got a point in New Jersey. Remember that at the end of the year when they are scraping and battling and clawing for a playoff spot. They were down 2-1 late, but Matt Boldy got a backhand goal with a few minutes left to tie the game in New Jersey. The Devils end up winning in a shootout, but still a point for the Wild as they try to fend off Calgary, try to fend off Vancouver, try to stay ahead of St. Louis if possible. Still a good chance they make the playoffs, but they need every point they can get. Even though they didn't win, that was a big point for them on Monday night. Gopher women's basketball team is in the finals of the WBIT. That final will be tomorrow night. Kent Youngblood covers Gopher women's basketball, covers the Lynx, expected to join me on Wednesday's podcast to set up that game, to talk about their tournament run, to talk about what's gone well for them. Remember, they were in the WNIT finals last year, so they are making the most out of their postseason opportunities under Don Plitzowite. Of course, it's not the tournament they want to be at. Stands in stark contrast to the women's Final Four. That field is set. Paige Beckers, UConn, Hopkins stand out here. Almost certain number 1 pick in the WNBA draft here coming up. Led UConn again. Tremendous win for them over USC. Would have been a much better game if Juju Watkins hadn't gotten hurt earlier in the tournament. But still, you play who you've got to play. Beckers has been tremendous in this tournament. That's where the Gophers want to get to, right? That's where they want to get to eventually. They want to be able to keep players of that caliber here. It's hard. It's not easy. But that's the caliber of player that can take you to the Final Four. A player like Paige Beckers, a player like Lindsay Whalen did, more than 20 years ago. So that's the contrast. Gopher women's basketball in the title game of the WBIT. Paige Beckers going to the Final Four with UConn, trying to win a championship in her final season for the first time. That will do it for me today. Like I said, Kent Youngblood likely on tomorrow's show. Thinking Lavelle E. Neal III will probably join me on Thursday's show. We'll see if the Twins win tonight. Big one for the Wolves tonight as well in Denver. Until then, I am Michael Rand. Have a great rest of your Tuesday. Back at it again tomorrow.